Well, we are ready for lesson 4 of chapter 11, and we're getting ready to read that together today. Living in the Desert is the title. If you're not there and would like to turn in your book to page 346, that is chapter 11, lesson 4. Kind of an interesting day to read about a desert when we are having extra cold here that we usually don't have this time of year. Living in the Desert. Page 346. We already read about how plants and many animals adjust to living in the desert. We're going to kind of review that just a little bit, but mostly this chapter that we're about to read, this lesson, is talking about how people adapt to living in the desert. So let's start with this page. You were there, and always take a look at the illustrations. This is a little gecko type of lizard that lives in the desert. You step outside your home near Tucson, Arizona, in the Sonoran Desert. Remember, desert just means really that there's a lack of rain, less than 10 inches of rain a year. But often our deserts on this earth are very hot places too, although there can be cold deserts. It's a warm autumn day. A lizard scurries across the stones that cover the ground. A few prickly pear and beryl cacti grow in the yard. So do a few small mesquite trees. It can get very hot during the summer, and it doesn't rain much. Those are the key things about a desert. Still, everywhere you look you can see beautiful mountains. Sometimes there is snow on their peaks. The sky is almost always a clear blue, and not a cloud to be seen. Before we read the next page, let's take a look at this map. This is the city of Phoenix, Arizona, where my friend James moved. Some of you know James. And these are some of the rivers that flow through the area close to Phoenix. And you can see all these little red marks are dams that have been built to help keep some water available for farming and for growing crops and for the city of Phoenix to use. The Sonora Desert gets only about 8 to 10 inches of rainfall a year. Now guys, sometimes we've had 6 inches in one 24-hour period here in Arkansas lately. About half of that comes in the rainy months from July to September. In order to raise crops, people have to find other sources of water. Before Europeans came to Arizona, some Native Americans dug irrigation canals to built aqueducts to get water for their crops. We have already talked earlier this year about what irrigation means. It means actually digging a small area through the dirt, could be 2 or 3 feet across, to let the water run through. That's an irrigation canal. So you might have a river nearby, but that's not helping your crops. So you dig little areas through the dirt so that water from the river or from a well or whatever source you have can flow out into your field and water your crops. But what on earth is an aqueduct? Well, it's going to tell us right here. An aqueduct is a trench or a pipe used to bring water from a distance. When I visited Israel, they had very dry areas, and they would use bricks to build these trenches or aqueducts to carry water from one place to another. Because, of course, growing food is very, very important. Having water for people is absolutely necessary. So they can bring water from a distance with a trench built out of rock or whatever, or a pipe. I'm going to move the book up a little bit and then we'll continue. Today there are dams and reservoirs in Arizona, especially in the Phoenix area. These reservoirs store water for various valleys and regions. In 1960, the California State Water Project was designed to bring water to Southern California. It provided funds for an aqueduct on the Colorado River. This aqueduct also carries water to the regions around Phoenix and Tucson. Because of irrigation, some of the dry land of the Southwest has become rich farmland. Farms in Arizona provide fresh vegetables, citrus fruit, apples, peaches, and pecans. Another important crop is cotton. The long growing season in Arizona makes the farms very productive. Very productive means they can produce a lot of food for people to eat. The use of irrigation has also made the desert a more inviting place to live. Phoenix, Tucson, and other desert cities are growing communities. In the last 40 years, Arizona's population has increased almost 4 times over. So before we go on from this page, a couple of things. One, this looks like it might be Tucson, but this is Tucson. And this one looks like it might be Phoenix, but it's Phoenix, Arizona. When we look at the picture at the bottom of the page, I'm going to have to move the camera a little bit, so it's going to jerk around a little bit. But when we look at the picture at the bottom of the page, you can see pipes carrying water out across the crops. They're kind of covered almost by the spraying water. The water's spraying out over the fields to make this a nice, great place for the little plants to grow. You may have seen that if you drive out on a trip somewhere. We don't have a lot of it around here, but if you've driven across country, maybe on a family trip, you may have seen irrigation happening in some of these aqueducts. Again, looking at these dams, these are very important in storing water and keeping it backed up in different places so that this area where there are many, many people, they have plenty of water available for them. This is a short lesson. The next page is our last part of the lesson. And this page talks about some of the important things that make it more comfortable for people to live in places like Arizona, where it can be quite hot. This is an interesting system. You guys all know that you have just a really nice air conditioning system in your house. You can just go flip a switch and you stay comfortable, or maybe you have it programmed. Most people do now, where it just stays comfortable for you in your house. Well, this huge thing was an early air cooling system way back in 1922. One of the first things invented to make the air cooler indoors. Well, you'd have to have a pretty big house to have that thing in somewhere in your house. There's also something interesting about the name of this cooling system. It's Carrier, and there is still an air conditioning company by that name in existence today. Probably, I don't know for a fact, but probably it's a company that was started by this person who came up with the very first way to make air cooler for us. Although air conditioning was invented in New York, the growth of air conditioning made it possible for businesses and people to thrive in the Southwest. In 1911, Willis Haviland Carrier developed a useful air conditioning system. This system cooled the air temperature and lowered humidity, or moisture, in the air at the same time. Many factories and businesses depend on air conditioning to keep their machines and workers cool. The first high-rise air-conditioned office building, the Milam Building, was opened in San Antonio, Texas in 1928. Today, air conditioning is common in homes and offices, and it has made the heat of the Southwest easier to bear. So earlier this year we talked about how businesses and houses and people used to go to bed pretty much when the sun went down until the electric light, the light bulb and electricity were invented, which made a nice comfortable light for people to be able to use and stay up later. Air conditioning is one of those inventions that made life more bearable, because not as many people lived in the very hot and humid regions of our country until air conditioning came about. And now, of course, like Phoenix we talked about here is a big city. People are more comfortable living in those very warm places because of air conditioning. We're not reading it together, but you might want to check out this. This is a pretty interesting guy. This is the guy that built the air conditioner, and he actually was a pasta maker. So what does a pasta maker have to do with air conditioning? You might read that and check it out. It's pretty interesting. And for those of you that want more to do, you might search out some of these different things online. If you look at the next 2 pages, this is Route 66 or Route 66, and that's a pretty interesting part of our nation's culture still today and our nation's history. So you could read those pages and then check out, perhaps do a little bit of research on the internet. Have a good day.